Namaste and welcome to Itihasdhir with me, Aditi Joshi, and my co-host Aditya Saraf. Itihasdhir is a platform which is dedicated to preserving the cultural, civilizational, and philosophical legacy of Bharat. Today we are joined by Mrs. Manoshi Sinha Raval, Dr. Ankita Dutta, and Mr. Vladimir Adityanath to discuss their book, The Manipur Conundrum. So, a short introduction of each of our speakers. Manoshi ma'am is an accomplished historian and she's the author of multiple works on Indian civilization. And she traces Manipur's ancient Hindu roots, its connection with the Mahabharata, and the cultural symbology embedded in the worship of deities. Dr. Ankita is a researcher on India's northeastern history and foreign policy, and she unpacks the Burmese invasions, the 7 years devastation, and the loss of territories like the Kabab Valley. And finally, Mr. Vladimir Adityanath, he's an incisive analyst of religious demography and civil conflict, and he examines the May 3rd, 2013 ethnic violence, the impact of illegal migration, and the strategic expansion of proselytization networks in the Hills District. This book is not just another piece of text which is written, it is a civilizational wake up call. The Manipur Conundrum invites every Indian to understand what lies beneath the surface, the violent headlines, and the narrative of this strategically vital regime. Welcome to all three of the authors. So I want to jump right into the questions. Manoshi ma'am, my first question is to you. It pertains to Manipur's Mahabharat connection. Why is it so contested? So you have drawn a civilizational arc connecting Manipur to the Mahabharat through Arjun and Chitrangada. Why is it that this lineage is controversial in academic and political circles today? And what ideological forces are benefiting from erasing it or denying this dharmic continuity?
Yeah. First of all, namaste and pranam to everyone. I, on behalf of my co-authors of the Manipur Conundrum, Dr. Ankita Dutta and Vladimir Adityanath, would like to express our gratitude to Itihasdhir team for inviting us for a discussion on our book, The Manipur Conundrum, History, Exodus, Conversion. So Aditi's question actually it rings with today's narrative that has already today's narrative since the last several decades. This narrative has already been set that Manipur is not connected with the Mahabharata period, though there are lots of historical evidences, including the Mahabharata itself. Mahabharata by Vedyasa and the Jaimini Aswamedha. Jaimini was one of the key disciples of Vedavyasa, and Vedavyasa narrated not only the Mahabharata but the 18 Mahapuranas to all of his disciples, and all of his disciples documented these narrations in their own way. So what Jaimini documented about the Mahabharata, we get only the Aswamedha part. The rest of that is lost, and only the Aswamedha Yajna part is available. And through that book, we get a lot of details about the Manipur of the Northeast connected with the Mahabharata period, not Manipur of Orissa that is generally spoken about in today's times since the last several decades. So Jaimini's Aswamedha describes in detail about the Aswamedha horse traveling to various parts of the country, including parts of the Northeast. And this book describes Bangladesh, Burma, Manipur, and several other kingdoms, including Meghalaya, as neighboring territories, neighboring kingdoms. And there is no mention about Orissa in the northeastern part of India. And Veda Vyasa's part, especially in the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata, describes about Manipur. But there is one single term that actually creates this confusion, that is the Mahendragiri Parbat. So there are, and this describes this episode, the one of the Vedavyasa's Mahabharata in the first part describes about Arjuna traveling to the various parts of the country during his 12 years of exile. And he crosses several oceans and mountains and then reaches Manipur, that is Manipura. But in the Aswamedha part, the geographical locations are described in detail, not in the earlier part. In Ved Vyasa's Mahabharata, in the Aswamedha Yajna part, the geographical locations are described in detail. And there, Manipur's geographical location as a part of the Northeast is clearly described. And it also describes about Ulupi, the Naga princess of Manipur, who was also married to Arjuna. Before Arjuna was married to Chitrangada, Ulupi was married to him. So again, both Vedvyasa's Mahabharata and Jaimini's Aswamedha Parva, both the books describe the Naga princess Ulupi and Chitrangada, Manipuri princess Chitrangada, together bringing up Babru Bahana. So that again, because in today's Nagaland, because there are many scholars and historians who describe Ulupi as being from Nagaland, today's Nagaland. Today's Nagaland comprises of a very small geographical locality. During the Mahabharata times, the territory is extended beyond what we see, beyond the territory of today's Nagaland. So your question is why this is contested, right? So there is a narrative being set by the Manipuri, not only the Manipuris, but Western historians and many people who do not want the cultural continuity of Manipur to stay. They want, as we have already seen across the country, we have seen how the regional histories and the national histories, the resistance, history of resistance, all of this are wiped out from our narratives. So we have been told about like the last 1,000 years of history as a history of defeat and surrender, etc. So likewise, in Manipur, it has been the narrative has been set that during the 18th century, during the cultural revolution, Vaishnavite saints from Bengal, from Mathura, they traveled they traveled to various parts of the country. And Santadas Adhikari, a Vaishnavite saint from Bengal, he came to Manipur and he forcibly converted the then Manipuri king Garib Nawaz to Hinduism. This is what the narrative is. But actually, Garib Nawaz has already been a Hindu then. His immediate ancestor, Khagemva, he built a temple of Vishnu in one area of Manipur. The temple is still there. And Garib Nawaz's ancestors, they built several temples dedicated to Durga, Shiva, and the pantheon of our deities. So the narrative that the Hinduism has been imposed, was imposed on the people of Manipur or on the king of Manipur forcibly by Santadas Adhikari does not hold any ground because they have already been Hindus. And in today's context, if we say ISKCON, so since the last several decades, we have seen how those who have been already Hindus also become ISKCON devotees, right? They are Hindus, but they start ritualistic worshipping of Vishnu and the Dasavatars, so Krishna, Radha. And similarly, even the Manipuris, they used to worship a pantheon of the Hindu deities, but after being anointed or after following the ritualistic worshipping of Krishna, Vishnu, and the Dasavatars, like various Krishna temples were set up across across Manipur, and the legacy continues to this day. But the roots of Manipur, the people of Manipur themselves, and even if the Manipuris themselves, many of the Manipuris themselves, they do not know their roots. They worship a pantheon of ancestral deities. Even I'm a Vishnupriya Manipuri. There are two types of Manipuris. One is Vishnupriya and one is Meitei. So both the Vishnupriyas and the Meiteis, they worship a pantheon of ancestral deities, and almost 90% of these deities are all the descendants of Arjun and Chitrangada. For example, I am a Vishnupriya Manipuri. We Vishnupriya Manipuris worship Apakpa as our Kula Devata. Apakpa is the 16th generation from Arjun and Chitrangada. And the Meiteis also worship Apakpa in three Apakpas. Actually, we Vishnupriyas worship one Apakpa. The Meitei Manipuris worship three Apakpas. The Apakpa, the first Apakpa is the first ancestor of the clan. Then the third generation from, suppose the third ancestor from my side, that is also considered, he is also considered the Apokpa. He is also worshipped as an ancestral deity. So, and then the seventh generation of the three ancestors, they are also called Apokpa in the Meitei, among the Meiteis. Yeah. And I hope I answered your question, or
JJ.
So my question is to Ankita ma'am. In the context of, say, when we talk about the seven sisters of India, we have often seen that there is an almost, a thread of conversation where we are told कि आपका तो कोई relation नहीं था when the Islamic invaders came or the Britishers came. You maybe did not have any connection to India. You did not have to fight or something like that. So there is already a discontinuity, as Manoshi ma'am was also saying, in cultural terms, but also in then geographic and historical terms. In that context, I want to talk about the Kabao Valley, in which we often brush aside in the mainstream discourse. So could you elaborate on the historical importance of this territory and the circumstances under which it was ceded, particularly post 1947? And was it a diplomatic failure or was it a complete strategic negligence?
First of all, Namaste Aditi ji and Aditya ji. We are extremely grateful to both of you for hosting this session today and having us all on this platform. My sincere note of thanks to the entire Itihasdhir team for inviting us to this podcast, and thanks to my co-authors, certainly. Yes, coming to your question now, we have always been fed this narrative since a long time now that the northeast of Bharat was never a part of the so-called mainland India. And this is a narrative that that has been perpetrated by several people, several organizations with their own vested interests since a long period of time now. And it continued for a long time. And of course, the geographical isolation of this region and certain divisive policies of the governments post-independence definitely contributed to that. But if we go back into the history, the ancient history of Northeast, the period of the Islamic invasions, when we actually did not have the concept of seven sisters then, because this is a later it's a later development that came about. So it was one entity at that time. Manipur, Tripura, of course, they were independent kingdoms. But if we look into the history, the ancient times, and several archaeological and historical sites in this region, from in Assam, Assam, Tripura's Unakoti, and many others. So it clearly conveys a picture of the fact that this region was never separate from Bharat, of course not, and it was an integral part of Bharatvarsha. They all have the different tribes and communities that inhabit the Northeast. They have their own versions of the Ramayana. So these versions of the Ramayana, they have their own names. There's a community called Karbis of Assam. Among them, the Ramayana is known by the name of Sabin Alun. Then Tiwas or Lalungs of Assam. They also have their own version of the Ramayana, which is performed over a period of 1 week, over 7 nights. 7 nights, it is said. We have ample proof, ample evidences to show that this region was never separate. It was never a distinct entity as we have been made to believe so far. And it only happened after the post-independence era and several other problems that we see now in this region, that we were made to believe, and we were fed this narrative that this region is completely different because of the geography, because of the tribes and communities that inhabit there. There has not been any proper academic understanding. I would say there has never been any honest discussion in the academia about this region, because if we look into the available research papers and numerous books that have been written in the Northeast, they are informed by the leftist ideological discourse. Since the time the missionaries set their foot here in this region of Bharat, the problems have not been discussed. The problems have not been discussed in the way that they should have been discussed. And this is the reality that we have tried in our own humble way to document in our book, especially in the context of Manipur and its people, its history and culture and its problems. Because the conflict that Manipur is going through since the past 3 years, it cannot be understood from the myopic lens of only ethnicity or ethnic identity. So this is that. And coming to the question of the Kabau Valley, I wouldn't go into the details of it because I have already written in detail in the first chapter of the second section that begins with the Burmese invasions, or which is also known in Manipuri as Chahi Thare Khun Takpa, the 7 years of devastation. And so once you read this chapter, the first chapter of the second section, it gives a glimpse of the historical and socio-political reasons that led to the rise of insurgency in the Northeast, with a special focus on Manipur. And the loss of the Kabau Valley to present day Myanmar, it was rooted in the if we look into the 7 years devastation, the Burmese invasions, it was rooted in that period, and British failures, and of course, most importantly, the rest of the country still does not know about it in detail. Just like the Burmese invasions, we know about the Islamic invasions, right? We have heard about them, we have read about them, but the extreme brutality and devastation associated with the Burmese invasions and the subsequent, not just the subsequent loss of Kabau Valley to Myanmar, but the destruction of numerous temples and Hindu religious sites across the Northeast, not just in Manipur, during the period of the Burmese invasions. This is a chapter, this is a story that has not yet been told. And we have tried to cover in our own small way possible in this book. And so I just hope that when anybody who reads the book, they are able to have a sound understanding of the historical problems, of the historical origins of the problem of insurgency, beginning from the loss of the Kabah Valley and its subsequent impacts upon the society. Of course, the post-independent governments at the center failed to address the problem in the initial stages, and history repeated itself again, I would say, when the state's abject failure was visible during the violence in Manipur that began in the summer of 2023, and the implications of which are going to be felt for a long time, not just in Manipur, but the entire Northeast.
Thank you so
I
much.
don't know whether I've answered your question.
Yes, yes, of course.
So I want to take the next question for Vladimir Adityanath ji. It's regarding the May 3rd violence. So the 2023 violence was, described as a spontaneous violence, yet your research has proven it to be wrong. So, to what extent was this violence orchestrated rather than just an organic event that just happened very spontaneously?
First of all, pranam to all of you, and and thank you very much, Aditi ji and Aditya ji, for giving me the chance to express my thoughts on this issue. The issues which we are talking about, like Ankita ji was telling, it has deep historical roots. Now, whenever we are talking about ethnic violence or a spontaneous violence or not, we have to see what were the demands of the violence, where its roots come from. One of the most first examples of documented evidence of breaking the territorial and demographic integrity of Manipur comes actually from Mizoram in 1965. And it was done by the MNF, by Laldenga and other separatists, the ones who actually started that Mizo war, one of the only civil war, proper ones which you can tell, which created major problems there. So this was held in Churachandpur in 1965, and a strategy was made to weaponize the identity politics. 50 languages of the South Central Tibeto-Burman family. Although these language family concepts, I have my skepticisms about it, but for simplicity's sake, let's go by the British standard for now. The biggest and the most destructive contribution of the missionaries were they found out by creating a common written script in Latin using for all of these Janajatis, they could clump similar languages together and create separate identities for their own ideological purposes. Suppose out of 50 you clump 20, you give it one name, say Kuki. 30 you clump together, you give it a name, Kuki Chin. 50 you clump together, you call it Kuki Chin Mizao. Okay, too long, does not sound fashionable, make it Kuki Zo. So that is how all of these terminologies come. In fact, when you see in the middle of the conflict, you will see names changing instantly. Cookie Chin, Mizo, Cookie Zhou, all of these terms coming there. So this is a deadly example of identity politics which came through decades of research and planning, mostly orchestrated by Western missionaries, Welsh missionaries, American Evangelical Church, Baptist Church. A lot of these orchestrations were there. In fact, if you go through Baptist missionaries' research while they were going through Ukhrul, they actually wrote a book, what challenges they faced while spreading Christianity. One of the major challenges they faced was the isolation and the change of languages and how to bring them under different identities and create artificial links. So that lessons learned, they are using very efficiently and they will continue to use efficiently. So this is one root cause of the problem. Solutions, when we come to it, I will address these issues. Second thing was that what we see is that by the 1980s, the Kuki people understood that Manipur was at a mess. The huge amount of Chinese ignorance. One of my well-known professors and one people who I respect a lot used to tell always that Northeast was born due after 1947 when somebody accepted a chicken snake. Then the Northeast was born. And I modify it a bit. Northeast was born when somebody accepted a chicken snake and somebody rejected renowned sociologists like Govind Sadashiv Ghurye and accepted the principles of Barrier Elven, a people with highly colonized motive, and adopted an isolationist policy. So these kind of attitudes, when you start taking it, this created a ticking time bomb. And Manipur, this is a separate topic by itself, so maybe we will go later in a separate discussion. But Manipur was a hotbed of insurgencies by the 1980s. There were insurgency among the communist-inspired militia groups by the Meiteis, and there were Naga insurgency still going strong in spite of lots of agreements. So the cookies took the advantage. They actually adopted a policy of dealing with the Indian government and telling them that we want autonomous matter. We just want autonomy. We do not want to secede. And they offered their aid to the Indian forces to against these militancies. All looks good on paper. But the reality was that the thought leadership was already there. P.S. Haukip in 1988 wrote a book called Zalengam, basically calling for an independent Kuki nation. And you will keep seeing this name coming back in different names: Kuki Gam, Kuki Zogam, Zalengam, Land of Freedom, all kinds of land of Christ. All of these names you will see coming up. What is the acceptance criteria for that Zalengam? First was their first criteria you will see is that they apparently want that Kuki Chin Mizau language speakers will have exclusive rights there. So basically, and funny thing is that the area which they claim, just like the first claimed Pakistan, most of the areas, these people were minorities with no historical ties to the land. So basically, this ignores the basic religious rights, human rights, all day. Also calling this an ethnic conflict ignores the diabolical religious angle there. Here, when they talk in Zalengam, what do they say? They say it's as a Lebensraum, pure living place for these people. I'm quoting his words, Lebensraum. Then what we see, lot of religious preachers, they are intellectuals, whether it is terrorists like Mark Haukip, who was arrested from Delhi, or whether it is singers and like Mafeli Lwando, politicians, or his father from Zoram Thar party. They all mention one thing: we are not able to worship Christ properly. We cannot coexist. So this kind of exclusivist policy does not ring of autonomy. It talks about secession. Now let us look about the actions. What happened? 1992, they took the exit from Manipur. Our future Act East policy. That is where they struck first. More Naga clash has happened. There is a conception that Kuki Naga clashes, if you go and research, they will say it's a population interchange. Yes, it's a population interchange. But the Kukis gained more. They basically throttled our bordering infrastructure in future. This was a big strategic victory for them. And any military expert will corroborate with me. And the blunders, and this was blunderously ignored by the state and central leadership at that time. Then what we see, the Gorkhas, the Tamils were systematically wiped out from More and those areas. Temple destruction, the Angala Parameshwari, targeted religious crimes. More than 10,000 Tamils were wiped out from More in 1995 alone. Then of the cosmopolitan. Sorry, just had a call. I'll just continue. We see a systematic destruction of the cosmopolitan culture there. Then what we see further advancement of this into Assam. We see the clashes at Singhasan Hill, Operation Volcano. That also cost tens of thousands of people. Then we see the atrocities in Mizoram. Kukichin Mizau, if we are considering one identity, we have to consider those atrocities also. At least 80,000 victims. Bru, Riang, Chakma, horrible atrocities. Basic human right violations. Then what we see, Dima Hasau, the Dimasa Mar clashes. Those were orchestrated from the Indo-Burma Partnership Mission in Churachandpur. Those were orchestrated from Manipur. Now, even that danger is still there. Lots of things are being still orchestrated. Illegal immigration, fake documents. It's clearly visible to visitors there. and census readings are very unreliable in those parts. So then we go, the first attack on Manipuris happened in 2007, then 2015. And 2015, More was widely targeted. 2007, Churachandpur was widely targeted. Then came 2023. I'll tell you one thing. The large percentage of the native Manipuri population of More Churachandpur were already driven out by the time of it. One time, the population had fallen to below 20% by 2021, estimated studies. And in Churachandpur, it fell to 4.28% by 2011. So this was a killing blow to finish it off. A very well orchestrated effort. Hope I answered your question.
Yes. So my next question is for Manoshi ma'am. Ma'am, you mentioned the Metis and the Vishnupriya Manipuris. So essentially, we've already sort of delved into the shared civilizational continuum that they have between them. But could you go into detail and clarify the relationship between the Metis and the Vishnupriyas? And how do their respective worship traditions, like devotion to Pakhangba or Sanamahi or Krishna, reflect their historical synthesis? Ma'am,
So for that, we will have to go back to the Mahabharata period. So Arjuna marries Chitrangada. Then their son is Babrubahan. Babrubahan marries Savitri. And their son was Dattamani. Dattamani marries Juteswari. And their son was Atya Guru. And Atya Guru marries 5 women. There is Sabirei Panthoibi, through whom he had 2 children, 2 sons. One is Sanamahi, the eldest, and the youngest, that is Pakhamba. So we will get the answers to all of this Sanamahism and why Sanamahi is worshipped as a household deity. We'll get answers later on. And then then he also, Atya Guru married Leisang Khombi, Changming Khombi, Promila, and Urmila. So from Leisang Khombi, so the other sons of Atya Guru and his 5 wives, 4 other wives are Mangang, Luang, Angom, Moirang. So there were 6 children. Sanamahi was the eldest and Pakhamba was the youngest. So there is a connection of how the throne of Manipur was given to Pakhamba instead, the youngest of the 6 sons, instead of Sanamahi, the eldest. So there is a story in the Shiva Purana about Ganesha and Kartik. Durga and Shiva asked both of them to circumambulate the world because both of them expressed their desire to get married. So whoever comes first after circumambulating the world would get married first. So Kartikeya, he goes out of the pickup, and Ganesha, what he did, he circumambulated his parents. And because of that, because of his wisdom, they got Ganesha married. So by the time when Kartikeya came back, Ganesha was already, he had children. So similarly, Atya Guru and his wives, when they became old, they thought of giving the throne to one of their sons. And they expressed their desire that all of these sons should go and circumambulate the world and come back. The one who would come first would be made the king of Manipur. So all of the 5 children from Sanamahi to, except the youngest son, the Pakhamba, he did not go. All the rest, they immediately set off to circumambulate the world. And what did Pakhamba do? He circumambulated his father. He said the whole world, his father is his whole world. And his father, he became very elated and he made Pakhamba the king of Manipur. So when the first to come back home circumambulating the world was Sanamahi, he got very enraged and he was about to strike his youngest brother. when Atya Guru stopped him, and he blessed him that thenceforth, he would be worshipped in every Manipuri home as a household deity. And since then, the tradition of worshipping Sanamahi as a household deity continued. And in every Vishnupriya, Manipuri and Meitei home, you will find Sanamahi as a household deity. He is one of the oldest ancestors being worshipped amongst the pantheon of ancestral deities. And there is a separate, since several decades back, a separate identity has been created out of all of this. We worship a pantheon of ancestral deities. So worshipping of Sanamahi is considered a completely separate identity. So they created, it is given a new name, that is Sanamahism. And Sanamahism is nothing but the cultural continuity of worshipping our ancestral deity, one of the descendants of Arjuna and Chitrangada. And that is, he is the 15th generation from Arjuna and Chitrangada. And thereafter, Pakhamba, what he did, he became the king of Manipur. The rest of the other brothers, they went out of the kingdom. They left the kingdom angry. And Pakhamba's son was Apokpa. He was also known as Thumal Guru. What Thumal Guru did, he asked all of his uncles to come back to the kingdom, and Sanamahi, he also came, and he divided his kingdom into 5 principalities. And he equally divided his kingdom amongst his uncles as well as, and he kept one kingdom for himself. And Sanamahi did not accept any part of the kingdom, because now, as he is worshipped as a household deity, he is satisfied with that. And Moirang, Angom, Mangang, Luang, and this Kumal, that is Apokpa. So we Vishnupriya Manipuris are the descendants of Kumal, that is Apokpa, and the Meiteis are the descendants of Mangang. So even you see in kingdoms across Bharat, you see how even we see the Mahabharata war took place because of between the Kauravas and the Pandavas because of land, right? And similarly, there was conflict between, though initially there were no conflicts between all the brothers, but the Kumals were the most powerful initially because Pakhamba, who was then the Kula Devata, he stayed with in the subconscious terrain, subconscious state of mind, he said that he would stay with the Kumals. And so the Kumals prospered. For 2000 years, they ruled Manipur. And they were very powerful. And the other kingdoms, the other principalities were also powerful, but not as powerful as the Kumals. But after some 2000 years, the Pakhamba, the Kula Devata, he asked for something from the Kumal king. He asked for 100 living beings as sacrifice, as offerings to him. And the Kumal king, he did not agree because he did not think it wise to offer 100 living beings as sacrifice. So he did not agree. Then he exhibited himself in the dream of one of the descendants of the Mangangs and asked him, like, if he would offer him 100 live beings, then he would shift his place from the Kumal's ancestral deity as the Mangang's ancestral deity. The Mangang king agreed. And what he did, he offered 100 worms from cow dung. And Pakhamba, he was satisfied. And thenceforth, the Mangangs became very powerful since that time. And there were conflicts between all of these 5 principalities. And ultimately, the Meiteis became very powerful. And we have read about the Ningthoza dynasty. Ningthozas are actually the Meiteis who were the descendants of Mangang. And since then, the Ningthozas, that is the Meiteis, became powerful, and they're still powerful today. And the other others, even the Khumals, like we Vishnupriya Manipuris, we are very few in number. So altogether, we constitute around 6 to 7 lakhs in total across the world, Vishnupriya Manipuris. Likewise, the Moirangs and the other clans, they are also very few in number. The Meiteis are the dominant, or they are very powerful also. They constitute around 15 lakhs across the world, 15 to 20 lakhs. And yes, this is how the Vishnupriyas and Meiteis are connected. They are from a same ancestor. And these stories, these are chronicled in not only in the Khumal Purana, but also various other historical records. And the Ahom chronicles also describe the Manipuris as descendants of Babrubahan. One of the kings during the Burmese invasion, he had to seek refuge under the Ahom king, then Ahom king, and he offered his daughter Kuranga Nayini in marriage to the then Ahom king, and he introduced himself as a descendant of the Kuru prince Babrubahan, means Arjuna's son Babrubahan. So that means the Ahom chronicles also consider Manipur as part of the Mahabharata period only, because the Manipuri king himself introduced himself as the descendant of Babrubahana, the son of Arjuna, Kuru Prince Arjuna. And likewise, the Manipuris, they are, the Mahabharata do not describe their lineage, but the Jaya Samhita describes the Manipuris as Gandharvas. So from the father's side, the Manipuris, that is Babrubahan, was a Kuru, and from his mother's side, he was a Gandharva. And that's why you see naturally, because Gandharvas are this, due to some curse, the Gandharvas, they came to earth and settled on earth, and they are considered the celestial, the divine musicians, right? So you see, most of the Manipuris, they have this innate inner trait. They have this robotic trait of being excelling in musical fields, no? Playing the dove, singing, and playing various musical instruments. And even when they speak in a very musical tone. For example, in Vishnupriya Manipuri, if I say kaha se aaye, for example, in Hindi. So if I speak in Vishnupriya Manipuri, I will speak in a very musical tone. Kumpitto aileta. So, so that is, even the Meiteis, the tone is very musical. But that is the Gandharva trait, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
I think I answered your question, right?
Ma'am. So I want to ask Dr. Ankita about the colonial manipulation and the missionary penetration into Manipur, and how it isolated, like during your research, how did you find it isolating the hill communities politically and culturally from the Meiteis?
First of all, basically, this hill-valley divide, this is a farce. So there's nothing like hill-valley divide, and this came only during the, this is a British evolution, I would say, basically. So there's nothing like hill-valley divide, and even now in terms of policy documents and everything, every time when we talk about Manipur, we will see Imphal Valley and the hills. But this is something which is actually, I would say, non-existent, and we have written in detail about it, both in the second section of the book and also the third section. I think first chapter itself, the first chapter of the third section, we have explained in detail how once the missionaries had set foot there in Manipur, there was resistance from the people to the conversions, and after that, how they moved to different areas like Ukrul and all of that, I think Vladimir has already thrown light on that. But most importantly, this entire hill valley divide, this is a farce. And I would say, please have a look at the chapter for that to go into the details of it. And yes, coming to the civilizational question, the entry of the missionaries in this region of the country, this is an existential danger that not just Manipur, but the entire Northeast has been facing since the British times. And as a result of which, the culture and civilization of so many communities, of so many tribes, they have been lost to the adharmic anti-national forces. And when a culture is lost, then everything is lost. And so this is the civilizational problem that we certainly cannot ignore. And most importantly, church-funded terrorism and religious conversions. We need to take into account these two aspects when discussing about the ongoing problems in Manipur. There are certain inherent problems in the monotheistic worldviews, in the Abrahamic monotheistic religions, which do not let them coexist in any society. So if we see whichever corner of the world these cults have penetrated, the society there has been devastated beyond imagination, and they are still inflicted by some of the worst episodes of violence till date. And this is a vicious cycle of never-ending terror that has had an irreversible impact on the cultures and civilizations of people across the Northeast. And of course, in this context, the violence that has been affecting Manipur, it has not only led to the loss of innumerable lives and properties, but also left deep scars on the long cherished Hindu societal fabric of Manipur. The divisive colonial era administrative and institutional norms, and the promulgation of short-sighted land laws based on ethnicity in post-colonial India, they produced long-term ramifications on the inter-ethnic, demographic, and religious equations of the state. And of course, the partition of India in 1947 and the rise of the military regime in Burma and the Bangladesh War of 1971, they had their own implications. They had their own demographic and political implications on not just Manipur, but the entire Northeast. And the prolonged neglect of this demographic and religious shift, the prolonged neglect of this demographic and religious change by the successive state and central governments, and the resulting dissensions over the emerging politics centered around the issue of identity, that played its major part in the outbreak of the violence in Manipur in May 2023. And as a result, the exclusive aspirations for separate nationhood, for a separate Christian state of a certain section of the people, they were being increasingly traded off for short-term political gains by the successive political dispensations at both the center and the state since independence. And talking about the civilizational aspect, yes, we have also tried to document this in one of the chapters in the second section of the book, where we talk about the bitter stories of the different clashes that have taken place in Assam, in Mizoram, in Tripura, and they involve this one particular community, the Kuki Chins, who have instigated these clashes in the very first place. They have killed the native inhabitants of these regions and destroyed their temples and religious places of worship. And if we see, all these clashes revolve around a similar trajectory that is inherent to the Abrahamic religions and their expansionist brand of religion-centric identity politics. So I think, I don't know whether I've answered your question.
Ji, you are not audible, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jay, that answers the question.
Also, if I would just like, can I add just one more point?
Jay?
Sure.
Yeah. So there has been a narrative that has always been going on in our country, and we saw this narrative playing itself out during the crisis in Manipur also. And the misinformation campaign was based on this entire narrative that who are the real victims and the real perpetrators of this violence, because we have this one-sided narrative called secularism in our country. The so-called minority communities, the so-called minorities are always being portrayed as the victims, and there has been a constant attempt to establish the idea of the so-called majority community as the aggressor, and the minorities as the victims. So the politics in our country itself is skewed in such a manner that everybody is constantly, on the lookout for the minority vote bank, whereas the so-called majority community is continuously being pushed out from here and there and there to here. And nearly all the mainstream political parties are to be equally blamed for such a state of affairs. With regard to Manipur, if we see the border districts, especially like Churachandpur, that have seen an extremely high rate of influx of not just infiltrators from across the border, but also forced religious conversions since the British times. And these are also the same districts that have also recorded an abnormally high incidence of HIV positive cases. So when we see as the demography changes, all these problems, from demographic problem to health problems, all of these they register a record spot, and generations after generations of youth in these places, they have been destroyed by the illegal drug economy and as a result of HIV/AIDS. So yeah, I just wanted to add this point. That's all.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Very brilliantly said, though, that it is not, I mean, the narrative that the majority is always majoritarian and somehow the minority is perpetually a threat. Yeah, it needs to be tackled really well. Sorry, I wasn't audible before. I was saying curiosity begs otherwise, but in the interest of time, I have one final question for Vladimir, sir. Sir, essentially, we've seen that Manipur has a lot of open wounds with regards to porous borders. So, how has unchecked immigration from Myanmar and Bangladesh changed the demography of Manipur's hill districts? And can you trace the link between refugee influx, arms smuggling, and the rise of Christian insurgent groups? I also have a sort of a follow-up. We've also seen a lot of paid, you know, proselytization efforts that have contributed to the erosion of indigenous culture. And has that also sort of eased the illegal immigration into the state, or has that had no effect on it?
First, let us start with the nature of immigration. When we see 1950, till 1950, there was a permit system in Manipur which was rigorously enforced by initially by the royal family and then by the first chief commission of after the merger agreement. That did not allow externals to buy land or to stay there without permit beyond a certain time. You had to get a permit, otherwise you could not survive there. So it was a very well documented system. Now, that system was removed in the middle of a massive ongoing civil war, three-way civil war between the Karens, the Kachins, and the Burmese government at that time. That civil war of 1948 to 50 took tens of thousands of lives and permanently crippled Burma's economy. Burma's economy has not yet recovered from it completely. So, if you look into these things, removing that agreement through a porous border without having proper enforcement was a disastrous blunder. So, illegal immigration, we see lots of evidences. We see by 1959 camps being settled up there. We see by 1967 thousands of families entering. Unfortunately, there was very little traceability. In fact, the government even, there are records of in 1972 about the government providing lakhs of taxpayer money to illegal immigrants without actually ensuring to verify that they cannot get legitimate documents. Now, this illegal immigration issue, if you see it, we have to see it this way, that the nature of the very cookie society further complicated this thing. In a cookie, there is a hereditary village chief, and this hereditary village chief enjoys total control over all movable and immovable property. So even if you buy a house or a property in their village, he can throw you out and seize all your belongings at a moment's notice. And this continues. In fact, there has been a coordinated effort to make it continue. Why? This keeps the society top heavy and very easy to control. The nature of that society. This, as well as their nomadic history and lack of strong nationalist ties, make them very useful geopolitical tools for any foreign nation trying to use them. So this is the reason why we are seeing so much support, international support for the cookies, and that support will continue because this is international geopolitics. Now, coming to this matter, illegal immigration. If we see the census studies, the Janajatis who we broadly classify as cookies, broadly, the major Janajatis, their population growth has been 9 times that of the Manipuris and way more than that of the Nagas too. Now, Nagas, the abnormal growth during 2 decades, we can account for it through census manipulation. But unfortunately, we did lots of studies on it. Even census manipulation, gymnastics by shifting around identities, is very difficult to account for that rate of growth of the cookie population there. Also, these village chiefs who had near autonomous powers, they have the authority to issue registration certificates, residential certificates. And with that residential certificate, you can go and get your voter ID card, Aadhaar card now, not a voter ID card, but Aadhaar card now, from say an ICICI bank in Churachandpur branch. So this has created a devastating problem. Combined together, the nature of society as well as the porousness of the border with the free movement regime and the lack of border fencing, this has created a lot of problems. Now, when we call about illegal immigration, people stop at illegal immigration of people. People don't consider the illegal immigration of weapons, drugs, and money. The drug system, initially, the drug economy of Manipur was not homegrown. It started from the Golden Triangle in Myanmar. Like we see during the 1950s, when America needed to create destabilization, they supported the Kuomintang rebels. Now, instead of paying them actually with cash, they encouraged them to grow drugs. This eventually led to a lot of issues and large scale drug cultivation. Now, when you do drug cultivation in such a large expanse of land for so many years, it destroys the soil. It leaches away all fertility. Even in Manipur, now we see excessive amount of fertilizers being used. We see trucks being hauled up, truckloads of fertilizer along nearly impassable hills to facilitate poppy cultivation. So this, unfortunately, I think will affect the productivity and the well-being of the environment and the water supply and the flood issues of the entire Manipuri people, irrespective of community, for at least another century. the amount of damage which has already been done. So this drug trade, it is the fuel basically to serve an insurgency. It's a powerful tool of giving them financial cash for buying weapons or other things. Second became the extortion economy. But extortion, I won't go into it. That is a separate topic by itself. So coming into this drug matter and illegal immigration, if we look at illegal immigration, 1962, there was a major wave of illegal immigration, but India was not the popular destination. 1988, there was illegal immigration. India was not the popular destination. Less than 10% came. But as we see policies being lobbied, there was a devastating policy change, like inclusion of any Kuki tribe as a scheduled tribe of Manipur, which is totally a vote bank move, which has no historical basis and an ill-researched thing. After this, we systematically see the growth of the Kuki, the India becoming the most popular destination of illegal immigration from Myanmar. Basically, the illegal immigration from less than 10%, if you only consider the United Nations reports, it goes to above 50%. So it's not an insignificant jump. Now coming to this regarding absolute numbers of population change. Between 1981 to 2011, the population of people having ST status or protected with scheduled tribe status, it grew from 27% to 40%, 13% growth. So, and we do not see this among the Nagas, who are indigenous people. We see it only among the Kukis, mostly. So, even if we consider some calculation, like some people did, I would recommend this paper, Nagaland's Demographic Somersault. That is an excellent paper where they actually did trend studies and mathematical analysis. So, you cannot just simply justify that. So as we see, there is just too much coincidences to all be true. A community comes together, intellectual leadership comes, books are written, weapons are supplied, systematic terrorism starts. They start approaching foreign countries in the late 2020s. In US, there are common tweets approaching. Even in social media, they were approaching foreign countries like US that let us fulfill our mutually beneficial agreements. In the middle of this crisis, they sent letters to countries like Israel. They sent appeals to countries like Germany, Britain. They went so far as to claim that they are willing to go under British rule. So it is never about integrity or sovereignty. It is merely about cultural and civilizational difference and unwillingness or intolerance about living there. So this kind of demographic explosion, I would say this is all more severe than what we see in West Bengal or Assam. Even Assam, even Assamese census data do not match this level of explosion. So this Burmese illegal immigration is one which is very less studied and it is very difficult to contain now. So another part of your question was illegal immigration, drug, and what else?
Yes, sir. So my question, you've answered most of it. The rise of Christian insurgent groups, refugee influx, arms smuggling. And then I asked whether essentially all the sort of uh, paid or you can say foreign funded proselytization has any effect on making this uh, concept of porous borders or the acceptance of this illegal immigration easy.
Okay, I'll give you an example. A pastor, Daniel Stephen, American, was caught in the middle of this crisis. He was supplying drones and other combat equipments to the Cookies and encouraging them to fight. When we talk about Christians and supplying of weapons, we have to understand one thing. The church, very rarely you will see the church fight directly. They will create a front. It will either be an ethnic front, or it will be a language politics front, or it will be some other fault line, which they will use as the front and proverbially fire the gun from behind the wall. So this is the same thing which we see here. So when we see this kind of weapon smuggling, now regarding weapon smuggling, there had been weapon caches in this region from World War II which were never recovered. So there is an issue of that, which has not been addressed properly. Second issue, if we see the weapons delivery from of the US to the Kuomintang rebels, that created a chain of private contractors who then later built their own empires. The Chinese desperation, as China became a superpower, not a superpower, but a regional power from mid 2000s, it started. The Chinese wished to counter this by using mafia families along their borders. The great five mafia families in China, among the Shan states, these people started supplying weapons. So supplying weapons is a thing which sadly benefits the geopolitical interests of both the regional power and the superpower vying for interest there. So there is no real way for this supply of weapon to stop. And church has been the geopolitical tool of the West, often to control this. So, yes, we had seen a lot of these issues being done, but unfortunately, the church has been very clever in hiding their tracks, both with regards to drug trade and with regards drug trade. At least we can see some uh, allegations with some across communities or IPS officers and other people complaining about those things. But regarding the smuggling of weapons, there is very little concrete evidence other than terrorists praying in churches, other than terrorists using churches as bases, which is pretty damning evidence in itself. But other than that, in fact, the cookies, it's there, many of these. But other than that, there's very little evidence other than, one evidence I can tell, Kangai Thel, where in Mary Com's village, the six-time world champion boxer, MC Mary Com, her village, they were using a church to basically use mortars and target a children's school in mid 2023. So these are some examples, And also there were allegations of SDPO Anand Chingtham being shot by a sniper in late 2023. So those were also told that it's proverbially done, but what to say? There are enough evidences, but the hard evidence, the kind of policy making evidence, they are lacking. And frankly, a large reason of it is due to the lack of will of the authorities to take decisive action.
True.
Thank you so much for the answer, sir. Uh, Thank you so much to all the authors, all three of you, for being here today. It has been an amazing conversation. That has been so much learning. I don't think we can compare it to any other episode in that regard. Um, to our viewers, we are very quick to jump on assigning labels to conflicts. I mean, Manipur conflict, when that happened, we were very quick to jump and say that, it is an ethnic conflict. Uh, the religious angle was altogether disregarded. And a lot of times when conflicts like these happen, we forget that there is a lot of history attached to a place rather than just a spontaneous burst of violence. So we often disregard that. In the book, that is the Manipur Conundrum, you will find that all of this has been covered very brilliantly: the politics, the geography, the history. All of them have been covered and gone into very deeply by all three of the co-authors. And it is an amazing read in that regard. The link for the book will be in our description. So thank you to all our viewers and readers for joining us today. And thank you to all three of our co-authors as well for being here today. It was an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. It was our
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.